Stop visiting my home without permission." The words hit me like ice. Sharp, cold, delivered with the arrogance of a man who thought the house belonged to him, my own son. Matthew, standing in the living room, fists clenched, chest heaving. Behind him, his wife, Laura, leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and defiance. I set my coffee down, the porcelain cup trembling slightly in my hands. This was the same boy I had raised, nurtured, carried on my shoulders, stayed awake with through fevers, guided through life's early hardships. And now he was shouting at me as if I were an intruder, as if the years of sacrifices and care I had poured into this home meant nothing. "You're serious?" I asked quietly, keeping my voice even. "You really think shouting at me will change who controls this house?" Matthew's jaw tightened. "I am serious. This house is mine now. I've made my life here. And you keep showing up, unannounced, uninvited. Enough is enough." Laura added softly, trying to soothe, but her voice betrayed arrogance. "Dad, he's just setting boundaries. You need to respect them." I felt a cold fire rise inside me. Respect, the one word they wielded like a weapon, yet they had shown none for years. I had worked my entire life to provide, to protect, to maintain this home, not to be ordered around by my own flesh and blood. "You don't understand," I said, standing slowly, deliberately. "This house, every brick, every floorboard, every memory within it, it's mine. And it's not just about permission. It's about respect." Matthew scoffed. "Respect? Dad, it's just a house. You've lived your life. Now it's mine. You can't just keep wandering in whenever you feel like it." I leaned against the window, hands folded, watching him pacing, his anger raw, uncontrolled. The arrogance, the entitlement, the belief that he could force compliance through shouting, it was all on display. And yet, beneath it, I saw cracks. Subtle hesitations, tiny glimpses of uncertainty. They thought they held power. They had no idea the force they were provoking. "I've prepared for people like you," I said quietly. "I've built this house, this life, these assets, with careful planning. And threats? They don't intimidate me. They only reveal how blind you've become." Matthew froze, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. You can't just—" "Oh, I can," I replied, calm, measured. "You think age has dulled me? You think time has made me weak? Let me assure you, patience, preparation, and quiet resolve are far stronger than anger and entitlement." Laura's confident mask began to slip. "Dad, this isn't necessary. I don't negotiate with disrespect," I interrupted. "And I won't be ordered out of my home by my own child. You've forgotten who built this house, who protected it, and who nurtured you into the man you are today." Their faces paled slightly. The room, once filled with the sound of shouting, now echoed with tension. I could feel the shift, their arrogance giving way to confusion, their certainty beginning to waver. I walked toward the desk, pulling out a folder I had prepared weeks ago. Legal documents, deeds, account statements. Everything meticulously organized. They had assumed I would bend, that I would give in to threats. But they had underestimated me. They had forgotten that patience, foresight, and knowledge are more potent than shouting and entitlement. Matthew leaned forward, voice cracking. "Dad, just leave it. Take it somewhere else. Don't make this harder." I smiled faintly, a subtle expression that spoke of control, of quiet power. "Harder? No, my boy. I'm just getting started. And by tomorrow morning, you will realize that arrogance has consequences. And disrespect has a price." The afternoon sunlight slanted across the living room, illuminating every corner, every photograph, every memory embedded in the walls. Outside, the neighborhood moved along obliviously. But inside, a storm was brewing, a storm they had brought upon themselves. I returned to my chair, calm, sipping coffee as I watched them fume. their movements sharp, impatient, unaware that each gesture, each misstep, was already part of the lesson I had prepared. By the time evening fell, the house was silent again. But the tension remained thick, palpable. I stared out the window, a small knowing smile forming. Patience and strategy were my allies. Tomorrow would teach them the lesson they so desperately needed, without rage, without shouting, but with quiet, undeniable authority. And in that stillness, I realized sometimes the greatest power lies not in anger, but in preparation. That night I barely slept. The house was silent, except for the soft hum of the heater and the distant sounds of the neighborhood settling into darkness. But inside me, a storm raged. Anger, yes, but more than that, a clear, precise plan began forming. Matthew had thought he could intimidate me with his shouting. He had thought the old man in the house would cower and retreat. He had no idea. I rose before dawn, walking through the rooms that held decades of memories. Every photograph, every memento, every piece of furniture told a story. They were reminders of what I had built and what I would protect. Not with violence, not with threats, but with strategy. In the study, I spread out the folder of documents I had prepared weeks ago. Property deeds, legal accounts, banking information, insurance statements. Every line, every signature, every document verified my ownership and control. Matthew might have thought he could overpower me with anger, but the law and meticulous preparation were mine allies. I sat quietly, sipping coffee, listening. Matthew's restless pacing echoed faintly through the hallway. Lavra whispered, trying to soothe him, but their combined arrogance had already begun to crack. They had underestimated my patience. They had underestimated my understanding of human behavior. And they had underestimated the quiet strength of someone who had lived a full life, faced losses, endured betrayal, and emerged stronger each time. Matthew stormed into the study mid-morning. "Dad, you can't keep doing this. Just leave. We're done negotiating." I looked at him calmly. Negotiation ended the moment you lost respect. You think anger and threats give you power over me? You've been wrong about that your entire life. He flinched slightly at my tone, though he tried to mask it with aggression. I just want... You want control, I interrupted, voice measured. Control over what is not yours to command. You have confused entitlement with ownership. You have confused arrogance with authority. But authority is earned, not demanded. And in this house, I decide. Lavra shifted behind him, unease flickering in her eyes. "Dad, this is ridiculous. We're not trying to hurt you, just let us live our lives." I leaned back in my chair, letting my gaze linger on them both. "You believe you're in charge here, but you've forgotten what it took to build this life. Every brick of this house, every cent in my accounts, every quiet night I spent worrying about your future, it all belongs to someone who respects it. And I do, you do not." Matthew's fists clenched again, trembling slightly now, his confidence faltering. "So what, you're just going to sit there?" "And yes," I said, calm but firm. "I am going to sit here and let patience, strategy, and preparation do the work. You think threats and shouting can force compliance? Watch and learn. I've spent decades preparing for moments like this. Every move you make will be anticipated. Every weakness you reveal will be met with consequence." The day wore on. I moved through the house with quiet purpose, checking and arranging documents, making subtle calls to Rachel, my lawyer. Everything was ready. Every legal safeguard, every protective measure, every possible maneuver they could attempt had been anticipated. Matthew and Lavra didn't notice, too busy squabbling, pacing, their impatience growing. By late afternoon, I had everything in place. The power shift was complete, though they were still blind to it. They believed they controlled the situation. They believed I would bend. They didn't understand that control had never left my hands. It simply waited for the right moment. I walked past them in the living room, calm and collected, letting them stew in their arrogance. "Tomorrow," I whispered under my breath, "you will see the consequences of disrespect. You will learn that shouting, threats, and impatience cannot overpower wisdom, preparation, and resolve." Evening fell, and the house quieted. Matthew and Laura retired to their room, muttering, still unaware that the tide had already turned. I remained by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on outside, calm, confident, and fully in control. And I knew the morning would bring clarity. The eviction wasn't just a legal maneuver, it was a lesson. A lesson in respect, consequence, and humility. By the time Matthew understood, his arrogance would be gone, replaced with a lesson he could not ignore. Sometimes, the strongest victories are not won with force, but with patience, foresight, and quiet power. Tomorrow that truth would reveal itself fully. Morning came, crisp and quiet, but the tension inside the house was electric. Matthew stormed down the stairs, face red, fists clenched, clearly expecting resistance, but not the kind he would encounter. Laura followed, her confident facade cracking slightly as she sensed the shift in the house's atmosphere. They thought this would be another morning of shouting and empty threats. They were wrong. I greeted them calmly, coffee in hand, sitting at the dining table with a folder of papers in front of me. My posture was upright, steady, composed. Every inch of me radiated control and quiet authority. Matthew froze for a moment, noticing the calmness he had not anticipated. "Dad, give us the money or leave. This is your last chance," he barked, voice wavering slightly. I placed the folder gently on the table. "You've had your chance to respect me. You've had your chance to behave with humility. Now you will see that arrogance has limits." Matthew moved closer, leaning over the table, trying to intimidate me. "Limits? Don't lecture me. You don't know what you're doing. This is my house." I opened the folder and pulled out documents, letting them fall gently across the table. Property deeds, legal notices, and ownership documents lay neatly before him. "Your assumptions were your first mistake," I said softly. "I've prepared for every move you could make. Every threat, every attempt at intimidation, it's all anticipated. This house, this life, is mine to protect. And I will protect it." Laura gasped. "Dad, what is all this?" "It's reality," I replied, calm, unwavering. "You've lived in a fantasy, thinking entitlement gives power. You believed shouting and threats could force me out. But today, you will learn that preparation, patience, and knowledge outweigh anger and arrogance." Matthew's fists unclenched slightly, his jaw tightening. He realized for the first time that I had anticipated his every move. Fear crept into his eyes, subtle but undeniable. The air in the room had shifted. He no longer commanded. He questioned. He no longer demanded. He hesitated. I stood, slowly, deliberately, and walked toward the window. Afternoon sunlight fell on my face, highlighting the calm strength in my eyes. "I will not negotiate with disrespect," I said firmly. "I will not allow this house, these memories, this life, to be threatened by entitlement." Matthew glanced nervously at the papers, then back at me. You can't do this. You can't evict me." "Oh, but I can," I said. "And I will. Not out of cruelty, not out of anger, but because lessons must be learned. And arrogance must meet consequence." I reached for the phone and made a single call to Rachel. By the time she arrived, Matthew and Laura were pale, uncertain, their confidence shattered. She handed me the finalized eviction notice, legally binding, perfectly timed. I placed it on the table with calm authority. The room went silent, the kind of silence that screams louder than shouting. Matthew's face turned pale. This isn't fair." "Fair," I echoed, voice measured. "Fairness has nothing to do with entitlement or threats. Respect, boundaries, and the rule of law, that is fairness. And that is what you will receive today. Laura's voice trembled. Dad, you don't have to. I shook my head. I already do. And now you will understand that disrespect carries consequences. This house is mine. My life, my rules. And you will abide by them. By late afternoon, the process was complete. Matthew, once loud, demanding, and unyielding, now stood silent, staring at the documents with disbelief. Lavra clutched his arm. Her confidence evaporated, replaced by shock. The eviction wasn't just legal, it was a lesson. One they couldn't ignore, one they would remember. I returned to my chair, calm, sipping coffee, letting the lesson sink in. Outside, life continued as usual. Neighbors walked past, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded within these walls. But inside, a quiet victory had been won. Respect had been restored. Authority reclaimed. And I realized once again, patience, strategy, and quiet strength were mightier than anger, threats, or entitlement. Matthew looked at me finally, eyes wide with a mixture of fear, regret, and understanding. He had miscalculated. He had underestimated the man he called his father. And in that realization, he began the slow, humbling journey toward respect. And in the quiet of the house, I allowed myself a faint smile. Lessons had been delivered. Arrogance had been shattered. And the dignity of a lifetime had been preserved. The morning after the confrontation was quiet, almost unnervingly so. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the living room, highlighting every detail of a house that had been at the center of years of effort, care, and sacrifice. Matthew and Laura moved slowly, silently, their confidence from yesterday shattered. They had not slept well, haunted by the eviction notice and the realization that their arrogance had no standing against patience, foresight, and wisdom. I sat at the dining table, the same table where countless family meals had been shared. Coffee in hand, reviewing the documents one last time. My posture was upright, my hands steady, and my mind calm. Every corner of the house bore memories of a lifetime of hard work, love, and perseverance. And today, those memories served as both armor and testimony. Matthew approached hesitantly, eyes cast downward. Dad, I was wrong, he murmured, voice cracking. I thought I could intimidate you. I thought I had control. I'm sorry. I looked at him steadily, my gaze calm but firm. Matthew, the lesson was never about punishment, I said. It was about respect. Respect for boundaries, for others, and for the consequences of your actions. You have learned it the hard way, but learning it is what matters. Lavra stepped forward, her confident demeanor long gone, replaced by humility. Dad, I see it now. We were wrong. We misjudged everything. Yes, I replied. You misjudged patience, preparation, and dignity. You thought shouting and threats could force compliance. They cannot. Respect and responsibility are earned, not demanded. And this house, this life, belongs to those who understand that. I walked through the living room, letting my hand brush against the furniture, the photographs. The walls all reminders of the life I had built. Every late night, every sacrifice, every worry for my children's future flashed in my mind. And I felt a quiet pride, not just in the house or possessions, but in the principles I had upheld and the dignity I had preserved. Matthew followed silently, humbled, absorbing the weight of the lesson. I understand now, Dad, he said softly. We need to rebuild. We need to earn trust again. Yes, I said, calm, unwavering. Trust and respect are not freely given. They are earned through humility, action, and acknowledgement of past mistakes. You have a long way to go, but today is the first step. Over the next few weeks, Matthew and Lavra adjusted. They moved through the house with a newfound respect, speaking softly, helping where they could, learning that entitlement and arrogance could not govern a home built on years of care and sacrifice. I observed quietly, guiding subtly when necessary, letting them experience the consequences of their actions and the relief of rebuilding trust. One evening, as the golden afternoon light bathed the living room, I sat in my chair, sipping tea. The house was quiet, but not empty. It was alive with lessons learned and boundaries respected. Matthew glanced at me, humility evident in his posture. And I saw a change, one that was real and lasting. I realized, as I watched him, that sometimes the greatest power lies not in force, anger, or threats, but in preparation, patience, and unwavering resolve. It lies in allowing actions to reveal truths, letting consequences teach lessons, and standing firm while others falter. Matthew looked at me again, this time with something like gratitude in his eyes. "Dad, thank you," he whispered. Not for the house, not for the money, but for showing him the importance of respect, dignity, and patience. I nodded slowly. Remember, lessons are never wasted when learned. The house, the life, the memories, they are yours to honor, not command. And the trust you rebuild will be far more valuable than any inheritance or asset. Weeks passed, and peace settled over the home. Matthew and Lavra moved forward, humbled and respectful, while I continued my life with quiet dignity. I walked through the house feeling the warmth of victory that did not need to be loud. A victory earned not by force, but by wisdom, strategy, and moral strength. As night fell and the streetlights flickered on, I sat back in my chair, letting the stillness of the house wash over me. And I understood this profound truth. Sometimes the strongest action is not to fight, not to shout, not to dominate, but to stand firm. Let life teach its lessons, and allow justice to unfold naturally. And in that silence, in that quiet, I felt complete peace. The lesson had been delivered. Arrogance had been humbled. Respect restored. And dignity, always dignity, had triumphed.